Good morning, and welcome to New York City. I'm Wendy Woon. I'm the Deputy Director for Education here at MoMA, and MoMA is delighted to be able to host this first exchange, the Art of Examination, with our great colleague, Bonnie Pittman, and the Edith O'Donnell Institute for Art History at University of Texas at Dallas. It's a great day in New York, and I have to say, the Art of Examination, the idea that art can help us develop critical skills in looking is really important. And actually, I just wanted to show you how I started my day. In New York, and when you go out at lunchtime and you walk down Fifth Avenue, you'll realize that you actually have to start to shut down and filter out. And so Bonnie actually encouraged me to spend my mornings like this. This is my dog, Buddy, and I like to sit in the garden for a few minutes. And what's amazing about Buddy is that she starts like this. And she's paying attention to everything, and she reminds me of, she's listening to the call and response of various birds, she's hearing the helicopters, the planes at different heights, the school bus stopping, the garbage trucks, the kids squealing in the next building. She really reminds me of how to pay attention again at the start of my day. So Bonnie actually came up with this idea of the exchange. She's very convincing. You don't say no to Bonnie, that's what I've realized. She said, let's gather just a few people in New York who do this practice, in medical schools. And wouldn't it be great if we just the museum people got together and exchanged, and then it was, well, maybe it needs to be a little bigger. And what she found was that there was such a hunger for participation and exchange and finding out what everybody else is doing, and actually questing and questioning and thinking together, that it was really hard to say no. So we said yes. And MoMA has this great history of really fostering and convening conferences of people who are experimenting with new things with the arts. If you go back to MoMA's original mission, it was to help people enjoy, which I love, understand, and use the art of our time. And that idea that art isn't just the end, the product, but it's actually a means for people to engage. Art is a human endeavor, and we should never forget that piece of it. Not a commodity, but a human endeavor. So I work with a great group of people in the Access Department. I'm really very proud of the work that they do. Francesca Rosenberg, are you here, Francesca? Right at the back, heads up that department, and Carrie McGee, where's Carrie? She's right outside, okay. Carrie has been instrumental in making this happen. Mary Malaithong, our manager of the department, Laurel Humble, Lara Schweller. We really have this great team, and they've worked really well with Bonnie and with Katrina, who have made this happen, so I just have to thank them. One thing, I'm going to tell you a few little logistics to start with. So first of all, my first logistic is make sure you enjoy the art wherever you go. You have 2 tickets in your packet, so that will get you into MoMA. Enjoy the garden before the rain and the hail start this afternoon. It's my favorite gallery of all time. There are restrooms just at the bottom of the stairs to your right. There are elevators just behind us around the corner. What else can I tell you? The sign-up sheets are at the base of the stairs for you when you go out to have break. I would ask that, I think one of the great things is that this is the brain trust right here in front of us. All of you have something to offer and to give. And I would just, and there have been a few people selected to kind of present, but you all have something to contribute. So I would actually ask our presenters to make sure we have this wonderful timer right up at the top, so you will see that, to keep to time so that there is informal time for people to exchange ideas, to go to lunch together. There is a list of suggested lunch places in your packet as well. I just meet other people and enjoy exchanging with each other and be generous with each other. That's what I would say. So with all of that, I just wanted to welcome Bonnie. I knew her, I think, first when she was in San Francisco. And then as the director of the Dallas Museum of Art, a great leader in the field. And now she's a distinguished scholar in residence at the Edith O'Donnell Institute. And so I turn it over to Bonnie. Thank you.
Well, I can't believe we're all here, and I can't tell you how excited I am about this gathering. It really was an idea that I had and broached with Wendy and her team, and they all said yes. And the terrible thing is when people say yes, then you start moving. And it was exciting, and I'm deeply grateful to a lot of people who I need to thank right now. I also have a lot of trepidation about today and tomorrow because, things can go wrong. You may not like it. So all of those things have been on my mind, but mostly I'm excited to be with you today. I feel a little bit like an interloper because I'm new to all of this and have been only practicing teaching for the past couple of years, primarily as my responsibility, and then this year teaching and working on the conference. Before I was a museum director, and there's not a lot of time to teach, and except I always gave tours in the museum galleries all the time, and people would come because the natural thing, like Wendy and others, that we share is our great love of art and the power of art to change people's lives. Both of us practice as artists, and both of us are museum educators for our lifetimes. And I think that draws from, like many of you in this room, from a special well and spirit of wanting others to engage with you in that process of deep looking and understanding cultures. And in this day and age, as in all periods of time, it's even more important. A bit of history. I was the museum director at the Dallas Museum of Art and retired in 2012 because I unfortunately contracted a respiratory illness that has been with me for 8 years. And it has taught me huge lessons. You never know how doors open and close. But it brought me closer to this understanding because my very extensive time in the hospital and with doctors to realizing how medicine was changing and that so many of the students were using digital, pads. They weren't, especially the residents would come in and interview me and then they would leave and I'd say, well, that wasn't an interview because they never even looked at me in the eye. And so I always wondered about that. I had an absolutely fantastic team of physicians, and I started talking to them about this, and several of them mentioned other programs that were going on around the country. I connected with them and very quickly began teaching on my own with some of the physicians at Baylor Hospital, where I'm on the board. And then as my world changed, I began to realize that for me, on what I call the good days, getting to the art museum and looking at a new work of art was transformative. And sometimes they had a lot to do with the healing process, like this great 14-foot hall Riddell bed where, for years I had taught it and talked about Henry Clay and who Riddell was and all the mahogany. And I came home one day from the hospital, and about 3 days later I got to the museum and I looked at that bed, having spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and said, I'll never look at that bed the same way. This bed has a life story to tell, and we've never thought about that life story. It lived in people's homes. It took birth and death simultaneously. It's more than mahogany and a fine craftsman. It really is a story about life. And from there, I began to rethink this narrative line of our collection at the Dallas Museum of Art. And it was amazing how I began to see anew things that I had worked with for 15 years. And so that's the gift that these programs, when you begin to think about the healing process, can open up to you. I was excited to connect with many of you in the early stages, and you all deserve credit, but among them was Linda Friedlander and Irvin Braverman at Yale University, and I was so happy to hear them. Linda called me one day, returning my call one day, and learn about their long collaboration, which really started this whole movement with their students in 1999. Wendy, can you get my water for me, thanks? And they started a whole series, thanks so much, of, excuse me, now that will fall down because things fall down in my life. I knock things over. And then they ultimately went on to do a controlled study and published 3 years later their research, which was fantastic, in the Journal of American Medical Association as part of Jacqueline Dolval's medical school thesis showing that the museum intervention did indeed enhance observational skills with students. And so those studies and those early actions led to what many of us are doing today. After 17 years, we're gathering, and I do want to say there were so many more people that wanted to come. Wendy had to use her firm dog voice that said, no. And I would go, well, couldn't we just squeeze a few more people in? So at any rate, we had so many people wanting to join. There are many of you who have contributed, and the exciting thing that I learned was that there was a whole field out there of this interest, and the important part of it was that there are many examples of learning in the museum. Some of you use VTS, visual thinking strategies. Some of you do not. In Dallas, we don't use that methodology. Ours is very interactive and quite different. And so today, I wanted to make sure that you saw that range, that breadth of experiences that people have and new ways of looking and engaging artists. All of them are right. You know, that's the best part. And as one of my medical students said, this course is so important to me, looking at works of art, because what happens is I don't have to worry that anybody's going to die. When he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about that particular a point of view when I developed new programs. But it was, it was an important shift in my mind. I do also want to thank my wonderful colleagues from the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School, and we began teaching Heather Wickless, who's here, and Heather, maybe you could raise your hand a little higher. Heather Wickless and Amanda Blake and Courtney Crothers, that are all in the front, and they're who I've been teaching with over the past several years, and we have many plans for the future. And it has been, we have 35, this last year, almost 35 students in our class, so the biggest problem we have is too many people want to enroll. But all three of them have been my partners and been doing a wonderful job thinking about the future with us, and we're excited to be a team. The forum, the Art of Observation, I'm going to get to this slide in just a minute. The Art of Observation was something that was formed with, after I had this idea. When I was the museum director, one of the things the staff hated was when I said, I have an idea. And they absolutely went into meltdown. Oh no, not another one. And I would always panic, like if I didn't have an idea a day, because I was stuck in administration. But having ideas is part of the creative process of leadership. So when I had this idea, I thought, well, there can't be that many people out there. Wendy and I actually thought maybe 60 people would show up. And indeed, then I started talking to Ray Williams, who did a forum at Harvard early on, and he was very supportive and helped me in a lot of ways, as did Linda and many, many others of you in this room. And we discussed who the leaders were in the field, and I reached out to them, and then I realized I had to be a little more calculated. And because I come from the art museum field, not the medical field, of course I reached out to art museum directors. And because those had been my colleagues for many years and seemed like an easy way to get the search done, because I knew they'd hopefully respond to me. And we found out that a large number of the art museums have programs that work with medical school partnerships. What's really interesting is if this program was big enough to include all the programs around Alzheimer's and autism and other special needs that come with medical care would be overwhelming and is its own conference. So we narrowed the focus down to just being the teaching programs with medical students and residents. The survey, many of you answered, and we were excited to see the range of programs and opportunities that were out there, and we began to make the selection process. As I said, many more wanted to attend. We had a waiting list of 40 people as we were coming into today's program. This slide gives you a sense of the 138 participants. Now, they're not all here today. They're rotating in and out because of busy schedules. And they are colleagues from throughout the United States. Also, we have a delegation from Rome and also from London. There are many, many more programs internationally, and that may be one of the next steps that we consider is bringing them into the fold. But this time, we could only manage what we could. What's exciting is you're almost equally balanced between art museum colleagues and medical colleagues. So one of the goals of this was to make that match occur and to encourage people to come with a partner, not just representing a single institution, so that the growth here over the next 2 days in these range of formats and styles of learning is to engage you and help you to take new information back to your programs. The idea behind this is, we can do the goal slide, is the whole idea of this is to learn new program ideas, and that's why we set up so many small groups and the teaching demonstrations to connect with new collaborators and meet people. As Wendy said, we're going to have an exercise in just a few minutes about meeting people, and to, very important, translate ideas into future action if we think that's a good idea for the future. So with that, I just need to thank some key people. As we all know, that's part of the program. In particular, I want to note Joel Katz, who we've had email conversations, in-depth email conversations for almost 9 months and had never met. That's the challenge of that. But he's also chairing one of the plenary sessions, and Joel is from the Harvard Medical School. I'm not going to do everybody's full titles because they're all long, which is good. But they're all in the roster, your e-roster. Ray Williams, who's here from my colleague at the University of Texas in Austin and works at the Blanton Museum, has been in Boston organizing many of these programs before he went down to University of Texas, and now he's beginning with other colleagues there to begin the new medical school programs. And then finally, Elizabeth Goffberg. Where's Elizabeth? Yeah, there she is. And she is chairing, and Ray is doing the plenary session on empathetic communication and patient care. And Elizabeth and I went through a lot of emails exchanging ideas about the evaluation and research, which is an area so many people are very, very interested in. There's a whole breakout session and also Elizabeth's panel this afternoon before the reception. So I want to thank you all for your work, and also all the moderators of the idea exchanges, and very, very importantly, all the people from the Museum of Modern Art, from the Frick, and from MoMA who arrange these amazing teaching demonstrations. If you know what it's like to organize things in a museum and accommodate 10 extra tours in a morning, it's no small feat. But they've done that, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful. Now we have a commercial break because Rick Patel, our wonderful director, founding director at the Edith O'Donnell Institute, could not be here today, and so we missed him, and he requested that we share a video with you that gives you a little bit of background about the O'Donnell Institute and the work that we do. So I hope you will enjoy this, and since many of you won't get to Dallas, Texas, I'm taking you there. So let's show the video.
We now are creating an Institute of Art History, the first one in the early 21st century, the first one in the center of the United States, and the first one in the digital era. The Edith O'Donnell Institute of Art History started out as a result of a challenge from Mrs. O'Donnell, who has believed in the arts as an essential part of any successful modern society. And she asked me to think about what she called art history UTD style, a university that fancies itself as being a kind of Texas version of MIT. And so we're a kind of little nimble institute in the context of these very big and rather grand and traditional institutes. The directors of some of the greatest ones are part of our team, and they watch what we're doing and they give us advice.
We are, at best, a kind of bringing together of a whole series of collaborators, individuals and institutions.
The DMA has now a major collection of Islamic art, the Kier collection. So we're going to look at Islamic art in new ways.
We will be the go-to place for Islamic art, more than anywhere.
The O'Donnell Institute adds a terrific dimension to the whole prospect of conservation. The O'Donnell Institute, in partnership with the Department of Natural Sciences at UT Dallas, has created a position for a conservation science professor.
We have not only a relationship with the museum, but we actually are embedded in the museum, building a major space for the Institute in the DMA. We have in the DFW Metroplex over 100 PhD art historians. One of the things that we did was to make an organization of those scattered art historians and to use what was already here and to serve as a kind of a gathering point. We have a big interest in what's now called large data art history. And we have a brilliant art historian who's the first art historian ever to have an article published in Science magazine. What's made all of this really come to focus in the arts is the Edith O'Donnell ATEC, Arts and Technology building. And this building has frantic, almost manic energy, and it's the UTD home of the Edith O'Donnell Institute of Art History. And what we want to do is to create a situation in which we graft the collaborative research methods of the sciences to the visual realm. There's another research cluster that's developing around Bonnie Pittman, who is a senior researcher. She has been doing a lot of work about the cognitive roles of art in healing. And so Bonnie did an entire class for medical students of learning the techniques of observation based on close looking at works of art.
I'm doing two specific things in the Art and Medicine program at the O'Donnell Institute. The first is teaching a series of classes and workshops with the students at UT Southwestern Medical School. We are looking directly at works of art at the Dallas Museum of Art and finding new ways to understand them and relate those skills of observation and analysis to their clinical skills as diagnosticians, and the results have been fantastic. We also do workshops with residents, and the Dallas Museum of Art has been a wonderful partner. The second initiative is an international conference called The Art of Examination, Art Museums and Medical Schools, and it's bringing together about 130 medical professionals and art museum professionals to look at the ways that they've collaborated to develop courses and workshops around the country. These medical schools have found a rich partnership with the art museums because the works of art tell stories just the way the patients tell stories. And it's a new way to evoke that information and to help the doctors that are in training to think deeply about that personal interaction, which is critical to the healing process.
I love the idea of Institute because it suggests something beyond the university. That the real audience for the Institute is not just the undergraduates and graduate students at UTD, but are the people of North Texas and of this region.
Well, thank you very much for that. It is Edith O'Donnell who has funded us at the Institute with a very generous gift of $17 million that was then matched by the University of Texas with another $10 million so that we can hire new faculty and do research projects and convenings like this. So as you can see, it was very important to her and to Rick and myself and the team from Edith O'Donnell Institute to have her recognized today. If she could have been here, she's 94, she would have. Very quickly, I want to introduce my colleague, Sarah Kozlowski, who is the Associate Director at the Institute. And let's see, Lucy Buchanan is in the back, and she's our Director of Development. And Katrina, is she here? You've all heard from Katrina over the years, but past months. Katrina Saunders, who's been my research assistant, and Sarah Perry, who I'm sure are dealing with registration outside. They've been invaluable in developing the rosters and the programs, and they've had the patience of saints. I also want to thank our hosts, our wonderful friends here at the Museum of Modern Art. Mary Maliathan, is she in the room? No, see, they're all working. As Wendy mentioned, she's one of the department managers. She's in charge of managing the department, managing Wendy, I can tell you that. Carrie McGee, who is here, and stand up, Carrie, because if my voice gives out, Carrie is my fill-in, and she's actually in charge of all of us for the next 2 days. She's amazing organizational skills. Our dear friend Francesca Rosenberg, we're so happy you're here, and she's having her new baby next week, and we're all very happy about that. And then my a moment of celebration is a new life. And my dear, dear friend, Wendy Woon, who is the Deputy Director for Education here at MoMA and has been for a long time and has been a dear friend. And then we developed a sustained relationship, and I think sustainable after this conference because of the gathering. And they have done the MoMA team has done just an extraordinary job of bringing people together and then arranging for all of the wealth of resources that are here today and receiving us. So thank you to Wendy and her team. Okay, the best news is I'm on time, and I want you to all, we're going to do our first interaction of Turn and Talk, and so I want you, hopefully, if you're sitting next to somebody that you came with, the idea is pick somebody new, so tap somebody in front of you, or because I see some of you sitting in clusters like the Dallas team right over there. They're 1, 2, 3. I'm going to pick you out. So what we're going to do is an exercise and it's called Turn and Talk, and and you're already turning and talking. All right. Okay. All right. This is not working. Okay. Wait. We have lost control, and it's okay. Let me see. Yes, we need somebody with a whistle. Can you all just bear with me for a moment? Okay. So the first idea is, yes, you're going to turn and talk, but try to pick somebody you haven't talked to before. And you're going to do this in a rotation for about 2 minutes apiece. So it's a series of questions like, who are you? You have 2 minutes. Who are you? And then why did you come to this forum? What drove you to get here today, physically, emotionally, mentally, on the airplane or in the trains? And then what's on your mind? What do you want to get out of the conference? Because the important thing is to begin, you're going to be participants. We're going to call on you, all participants. You see that in the program. That means we're calling on you. So be prepared. And after we do turn and talk, and if I can ever get you quiet again, then we're going to do a session of what's on your mind, where we'll call on a few of the members in the conference to make 2 minute, not 3, but 2 minute comments, and they'll just rise from their seats, and then it'll be open to all of you. Then I think we go right into Alexandra's. It says, take puffers. So then we'll go into Alexandra's talk. So we seem to be doing pretty well in terms of time. So now, did you find your partner? Somebody you not know before? Okay, and then here are your 3 questions. Okay, you have 20 seconds, according to the timekeeper, to finish the first conversation, and then the second one begins, if anybody heard me. I know. It's 10:03, is that what you said?
10:06 right now.
10:06, so we're really close.
Well, because we have a half an hour.
Yeah, we have plenty of time, yeah. Yeah. Okay, you should switch now so the other person's talking or sharing information. Did everybody hear me? We'll never know. Another. Oh, I see. Oh. Okay, you have 15 seconds. We're doing. Uh-oh. Oh, well. Okay. Is everybody met a new person? How we doing? Good. Thank you. So as I said, one of the real goals here for Wendy and myself is to have you meet new people and connect in new ways. So I really hope you'll do this all day today and during the breaks and certainly tomorrow. The next session, I'm going to call on a few of our colleagues, is about what's on your mind. And I've asked them to talk for no more than 2 minutes about some of the things that are on their mind. And then we'll take some of you as general participants in the audience to help us. The first person is that I'm calling on is Horace Ballard, and he's just going to rise from his seat. Horace, are you here? You are, and what a voice. Hey, good morning. And Horace is the curator of education at Birmingham, and he worked at Rhode Island School of Design before that. And most importantly, in the notes that he sent in about his autobiography in 10 words was a quote from Emily Dickinson, "I dwell in possibility." So welcome, Horace.
During kind of an internal medicine visit to speak to their patients. And I always go, oh my God, if I could get people to look at a painting for 5 or 10 minutes, I would win the Nobel Peace Prize in art. But that's the first thing. The second thing is the idea of mirror neurons. I am obsessed with neurobiology and neuroscience these days. I am obsessed with the idea that when you watch a dance performance, when you're looking at a Monet, the dynamism of the gesture is mirrored in our bodies. The right side of our brain lights up when we look. And I love when neuroscientists talk about how looking at art, watching film, inspires them to think about their work. And the third thing I'm really interested in is kind of this last chapter of the dissertation, which is about Thomas Eakins and his work with Thomas Jefferson College of Medicine in Philadelphia, and thinking about how queerness is constructed in the 1870s at this moment that photography and surgery are coming together, at a moment in which there is this incredible, you should go to Philadelphia Archives and look it up, in which free African-American bodies were dug up, made plaster casts, put at PAFA, and those are the bodies that Thomas Eakins' students drew from. This sense that artists have always been trained in the bodies. Artists have always had to think about musculature, kinesthesiology, dynamics, fluidity of muscle, of blood, of motion, of close observation. And doctors have always done the same. How much do we push our friends, colleagues, and patrons to understand that historic development of a kind of attainment of knowledge, or how much do we talk about the now? So thank you.
Thank you, Horace. And perfect timing. Okay, the next colleague that we're calling on is Erwin Braverman from Yale. Erwin, where are you? There we are. Hi. He's going to, yes, go ahead and take the mic. Erwin is at the Yale Medical School, and one of the things he made an observation about, which I loved, was that he'd like to have staged in one of his programs a Gregory Crutzen photograph, which is kind of amazing to think about.
So I decided that what I thought I should do is say something about the history of this movement. And so it's been 18 years since 1998 that Jackie Dolev, who was then a Yale medical student, and Linda Friedlander from the Yale Center for British Art, and I created this course, Enhancing Observational Skills Through the Use of Art. It has struck a vibe here and abroad that we never anticipated. And even before the publication of our paper in JAMA in 2001, we were frequently consulted by other institutions, medical, nursing, and undergraduate from here and abroad. And it was not unusual to have visitors from these institutions as observers during our course when we're teaching the medical students, as well as our traveling to other institutions. And so this forum comes at an appropriate time for all of us to compare notes and to form new approaches to strengthen this aspect of medical education. So this program serves as a reminder and a stimulus for students and faculty that observational skills in medicine still matter, not just for diagnosis, but equally important for saving time and money, often in arriving at that diagnosis. And the development of sophisticated imaging techniques and laboratory tests since the mid-1970s have blunted and diminished the spontaneous and inherent observational skills of physicians. So we believe that this program can refocus attention to resurrecting this important skill. So our program at Yale includes total student immersion in a gallery experience, followed by analysis of medical images. And both of these activities illustrate a variety of cognitive and visual features that serve as paradigms for evaluating patients. Our program also provides the student with a cerebral experience of finding and evaluating all the details in an unfamiliar object, whether art or human, so that Sir William Osler's aphorism can come to fruition, namely, learn to see, learn to hear, learn to touch, learn to smell, and to know that by practice alone, you become expert. And we plan to illustrate our approach in our demonstration tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is another colleague from the Art Museum field. Gretchen Dietrich is currently the chair of the Education Committee and on the board of the American Association of Museums. She is also here as the director of the Utah Museum of Arts. And Gretchen and I have known each other for a long time, just like Wendy and I, because we're cut out of the same cloth, and we're hoping we can take this movement into share it with our colleagues. But Gretchen, your 2 minutes. And just to mention this, her talent is juggling champagne bottles. So as she's talking...
Someone made that up for me. Jorge. And actually, I just want to say, I'm actually the chair of the Education Committee for the Association of Art Museum Directors, the AAMD, a wonderful organization, different from AAM. But I'm so delighted to be here. And when Bonnie calls you, you just come. That's what happens. So my thoughts here have to do with the bigger picture. So how is it that the kind of learning and teaching that is happening in these programs that are happening all across the world, how is that kind of learning and that kind of looking and that kind of concerted effort and connection to art objects, how can that improve the practice more broadly of art museums and how we strive to engage visitors all over and throughout our communities? And so I'm going to be looking as, and I think Bonnie sort of already said it, museum directors, your job shifts a bit, right? I don't teach as much as I used to, and I miss it very much. But my job now requires that I have a sort of a little higher level view, and making sure that we have the funding in place to do all the great things that we want to do. So, so I'm delighted to be here, and I'm going to be looking at and thinking about the bigger picture and how these kinds of programs, it's so amazingly interesting to take such a deep dive into a very particular kind of program. But how is the work that you're doing, how can that inform and improve the ways in which all art museums and all museums are striving to have a better impact, a deeper impact, to educate, to engage, and to be more relevant as the communities around us grow and change. So I couldn't be more delighted to be here, and I just look forward to reconnecting with many of you and meeting many of you, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen. Let's see, Carolyn Grozer, where are you? From Houston. There she is in the middle. And Carolyn is the chair of learning at the Houston Museum of Fine Arts. And she describes herself as being the person you want to go to. And she is the calm in the face of the storm. And Lord knows there have been enough storms down in Houston recently to make that a
does
reality.
Seem appropriate, doesn't it? Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Bonnie, and thank you all for being here. This is great. I'm very honored to be working with you these couple of days. I was just talking with someone that I don't know, and I said that I think one of the most important things that we as art museums can give to the medical field is a safe space to talk about things that are really important, but in a place where life and death is not, there isn't the consequence that you have in the clinic. And so I'm interested in exploring a little bit beyond that, that safe space. And it seems to me that what we're doing is curricular, and that's really important, both for medical education, but also on the museum side for object-based learning. This is one of the things that we do in object-based learning as museum educators, and I would love to see this work incorporated more within object-based learning. And then beyond that, though, I think that what we're doing is contributing to the wellness of medical students, of faculty, of the providers of medical care. And so I would love to see us through these 2 days talking about how this work connects with the wider field of wellness. So thank you again.
Thank you, Carolyn. Bhavika, Bhavika Kaul is a doctor and chief medical resident at the medicine at Baylor College of Medicine and the MD Anderson Cancer Center. So welcome, and I'd love to hear your comments.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I guess what's on my mind is a couple things. So we, Carolyn and I, co-teach a course, and our goals are to improve the art of observation among medical students and then also emotional intelligence in a digital age. Interestingly, I took the course 7 years ago, and then for the last 3 years have been co-teaching it. And I want to share a patient story actually with you, if you don't mind, that solidified in my head the importance of this course. On my last 30-hour call of residency, I had a patient I was called to see for hypotension, which is low blood pressure. The patient had been in the hospital for about 2 months, had been hypotensive all the time, and it had been attributed to a bad infection. When I walked in the room, the first thing I noticed after the vital signs was that actually, looking at her pictures at bedside and then her family as well, she was significantly darker, like 10 shades darker. And this is a patient who has been in the hospital without sun exposure. And I immediately diagnosed her with adrenal insufficiency. So I think that's something that this course had taught me to see beyond just the vital signs, to see beyond the labs. And one of the things that we're working on is trying to figure out a way to integrate it into our core curriculum, because it's something that you don't learn the value of until you've been through it. So I'm excited to see what other people have ideas about expansion, and then also with expansion comes issues on funding and figuring out ways to conduct research on this work as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhavika. And our last person to speak this morning is Dr. Elliot Sussman. Is Dr. Sussman? There you are. And Dr. Sussman is with the Association of American Medical Colleges and also serves as a distinguished member of the Village Health Organization. So thank you for being here.
Thanks. It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I look forward to learning with you. One of the things that's on my mind is just serendipity. When I moved from the great art city of Chicago to Allentown some 25 years ago or so, the very first morning there was a knock on the door. A man introduced himself. It turned out that in Allentown lived the chairman of the board of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Phil Berman, with his carnation, somewhat connected to this wonderful museum as well. He just took me around the city, and Lehigh Valley Hospital ended up with a great outdoor sculpture garden with a resident curator, lots of connections to the Allentown Art Museum. And it was all because of really serendipity. So in this amazing city of New York, let's all look for serendipity as we learn together. I'd also encourage folks, as they look through that window of observing, to think about the arts from the point of view of the physician as being able to, frankly, do a better job of connecting physicians and others in the healthcare field, not just within that field, but outside to their communities. The arts, as Bonnie said, are a wonderful way to do that. And in the process, to perhaps having a better sense of equipoise in their own lives. So I look forward to a great couple of days. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for being here. Okay, now it's open to some of the rest of you. We have about 8 minutes. If anybody would like to raise their hand and offer their comments about their observations for the next 2 days or what you'd like to get out of it, I'd be very grateful. Great, please. Be bold, stand.
So I'm Joel Howell from the University of Michigan, and I'm prompted by my old friend who I didn't know was going to be here. We haven't seen each other in years, Elliot Sussman's comment about looking out to communities. But I also think, and this is something that's going to be obvious, I think, to the physicians, but maybe not so to the art educators as much, the importance of art is looking at our patients as human beings, as people. I mean, right now, this very second, at institutions all over New York City and Ann Arbor and everywhere else, Houston, et cetera, young people who, because they're young, believe they will never die, are taking care of people who know they're dying. How do you grapple with that? Well, the arts are one way of doing that. They're also sitting in front of computers right now. I bet you, what percentage of the house staff at Baylor are sitting in front of a computer right this second? Probably 90, exactly. And looking at art, thinking about art, it's a way of connecting with what it means to be human, what it means to go through the life cycle. We're all going to live, we're all going to die. What it means to have relationships, what it means to be unsure. What is the meaning of this work of art? Well, it's ambiguous, just like taking care of patients is ambiguous. So that's what I'm hoping we can learn more about in terms of how to teach that and impart that to our students.
It's a very, very powerful statement. Thank you. Someone else? Now, we did turn and talk, so you would have comments. Yes, thank you. If you'd rise, and here's a mic being handed in from your...
Hi, my name is Lisa Wong. I'm from Boston. I'm a pediatrician and actually a musician, so not much of an artist, but working with a lot of colleagues who do work in art. My interest as a pediatrician and interest in arts education is that we learn a lot from the art educators from K through 12, from preschool and college, and see how we can blend what all knowledge that's already there is and how we can apply it to our medical students. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, but just learn how to apply it to a different education population.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. I'm waiting for the next hand. Yes, great, over here. Oh, there you go. And then why don't you come down to the mic right here?
Thank you so much. I'm here with Isa Lampe from the Cantor Arts Center. We're both from Stanford University. I'm Audrey Schaefer from the School of Medicine. This is just an amazing collection of people. And I wanted to use a quote from Martha Nussbaum, the philosopher, that she wrote about literature, but I think applies equally well to the arts, and that is that we have never lived enough. And I think that the arts brings that forward, as has been mentioned already in terms of our humanity. And what we've been struck with most recently is through our work with medical students and now undergraduates is that physicians who are on faculty or practicing in the community hunger for this type of continuing education as well. And so we've started to open up special programs for our faculty at the medical school. And I think it's just an amazing opportunity for collaboration between hospitals, clinics, and art museums.
And our last comment over here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Edie Langner. I'm a retired internist, and I went into practice in 1972. And I have seen nothing much except a real downhill slide in what's happened between the relationship between doctors and patients. And now I'm at the section of my life where I'm taking care of my family, my husband and very sick members of my family, and there is no time for them to be seen by their physicians. So I feel responsible, frankly, for being a physician who's been in practice during this time, and yet we've allowed our fabulous profession to have this happen. And not that any of us are in charge of what happens in the world, but there is a sense of responsibility that we all face for where we are. And so my goal for this is that we encourage all these young physicians that we're training to turn this around, and it's our responsibility to give them the tools to do that. For me, art is one of those tools.
Well, Thank you all. I'm going to let you all stand and stretch while Alexandra gets up here to, and I'll introduce her in just about a minute or two. And but I just want you to get up and don't move out of the auditorium because Alexandra's going to start speaking. But just stretch your legs. Okay. Yeah. Oh, good thinking. I'm going to do a. Okay, there's your light.
You had plenty of light.
I had plenty of light, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to just do a brief introduction to you, and then I'll, and you stand right here with me.
This is Alexandra for you.
Down there?
Okay. And this is yours.
Okay.
Bonnie,
Yes.
there's another chance with the group before the end, and I won't be here tomorrow, unfortunately. I'd like to just mention the interprofessional relationships that could develop between medicine and museums, and also other professionals like fire personnel,
Yes.
police, social workers.
What I can do is, because I need to introduce Alexandra. So just as I thank her, I'll
Fred.
Fred Sussman, right?
Shipman. Yeah. You don't have to make a special time for it if there's another forum. It'd be happy.
Well, today there isn't, so I'm just looking. Because we go into all the
That's fine.
plenaries.
So if you want to do it before, I'll
Yeah.
spend literally 30 seconds.
Okay, that'd be
and
great.
talk about
Yeah.
being a resource if people want to know how
Okay.
to do it. They
Okay.
can contact me.
Okay. Yep, we're going to get you back on track. If you'd all take your seats now. No, you're not. I know that. I've come to that conclusion really quickly. All right, everybody sit down. Whoever my whistler is, I'm deeply grateful. I'm already relaxing because the very thing that we wanted to have happen is happening, which is people meeting each other with excitement. What I'm going to do is, just before I introduce Alexandra, Fred Schiffman, who's in the back, came down specifically and wanted to make a comment about his observations. In large measure, he won't be here tomorrow, which would have been great to have in the Future Forward. So many of you, there are 2 sessions tomorrow, Future Forward and sort of the summary of the conference. And I hope that you'll be thinking about your comments because those are really open to participants.
So I just wanted to mention, I'm from Brown. I work with medical students, residents, fellows who attend the museum, the museum. That's a more traditional thing that we do. I would urge you, once you get these programs going, to add other professionals. We've had a terrific program involving Providence police detectives who look at art with us, and we're opening it to the fire department and others. Once we look and learn to see with other professionals, it's a genuine, incredible dimension that's added. And I've networked with police chiefs around the country through the police chief of New Haven and Providence. And so if any of you would like to do it, please contact me and you can develop similar programs. Thank you.
Thank you. So there we go, Future Forward. Well, now it's time to introduce my new friend, but that's very important to me and a wonderful, wonderful person who shares one of the great passions that I have, which is looking deeply. I have a practice of doing something new every day. Today is 1,979 days that I've been doing this practice, where I do 1 to 3 new things a day. Yes. And even in the hospital, I find new things to do. Work and medical do not count, but everything else does. So meeting new people for the first time, seeing things in new ways, and having experiences that I've never had before. And it's been a very important part of my life in the healing process and sustaining me. And Wendy and I were talking one day last fall, and interestingly enough, we both had on our desks the same book. And the book was written by Alexandra Horowitz. And we both were so excited about On Looking, 11 Ways to Walk with expert eyes, because it really is about the joy of attending, with all of your senses, with all of your knowledge, with all of your mind, and learning from others. We knew immediately that Alexandra Horowitz was the speaker for this forum because she would take us outside of our comfort zone with art and medicine and into thinking about the everyday world around us. What's important to realize is I was also at the Dallas Museum of Art. I had just read a series of studies about how long people look at works of art. And to say I was depressed is an understatement. The studies show somewhere, if they're generous, between 10 and 17 seconds. So what is anything that lasts longer than that, I would call success. So there's been research at several of the major museums. They're not all statistically accurate, but that notion of slowing down, looking deeply, seeing with all of your mind and body and spirit is something we want to have happen. It doesn't all happen in 17 seconds. So turning to Alexandra and reading her book, I really encourage you to do that. She weaves together these different frameworks and about selecting and using your mind and body. And it's about the power of observation, about the power of taking dozens of walks around the city in what she called the ordinary city and looking with experts in different ways. And she had the most amazing teachers, including her son, who took her down the road of the block they live on and saw the triangles and the circles and the O's, walking with an amazing woman, Arlene Gordon, who is blind, and hearing in that particular walk how a person who relies on auditory senses, really has to process this information very, very differently than we do, but can see in their own way. And then one of my favorite chapters is, of course, by Mariah Callum, the illustrator. And in it, Mariah says, excuse me, to a child as an artist, everything is relevant. Little is unseen. Everything is relevant. Little is unseen. I mean, that says it all. As a result of her work, she's going to talk about the process of her study to do the work. And just so that you know, she has also been in the New York Times. She has a wonderful book that was a bestseller. That's how why Wendy fell in love with her. Inside of a Dog, What Dogs See, Smell, and Know. Not being a dog person, I'm a cat person. I haven't read that one yet. She is an adjunct professor at Barnard College in Columbia, where she teaches seminars on canine cognition and creative nonfiction writing. Very interesting yin and yangs of life. And very importantly, for those who are dog lovers, and I know there are a lot of them in the room, her next book is on being a dog. Following the dog into the world of smell. So Wendy, there you go. It'll be out in October. With joy and deep respect for all the work that she's done to bring us here together, I want to introduce Alexandra.
Good morning. Thank you, Bonnie, very much. Right now, you're missing, I'm sorry to say, the vast majority of what's happening around you. You're missing events unfolding in your body, in the distance, and right in front of you. By marshaling your attention to my voice, you're ignoring an unthinkably large amount of information that continues to bombard all our senses. The hum of the air conditioner, the ambient noise in a large room, a person shifts in her seat, someone else stifles a cough, the way sound is falling in this room, different from other spaces, the sensation of your chair pressing against your legs or your back, your tongue touching the roof of your mouth, perhaps, the way your lips are touched together, the tension you might be holding right now in your shoulders or jaw, the warmth of your thighs if you're crossing your legs, the coolness of the tips of your fingertips, the blurred view of your own nose and your peripheral vision you're not seeing, the warm smell of the material of the chairs that came up as you sat in them, the clean smell of other bodies around us, and the perfumes that we apply to ourselves. This ignorance is useful. In fact, we usually compliment it and call it concentration. It enables you not just to notice the sound of my voice, but to hear the words, think about their meanings, hear the ideas behind them. Alas, though, we tend to bring this kind of focus to most activities we do, not just the most complicated, but also the most ordinary. To a surprising extent, we fail to pay attention to the journey that is the days of our lives to begin with. And we miss the possibility of being surprised by what is, in essence, now hidden right in front of us. So this morning, I want to tell you a little bit about a project that I did that Bonnie alluded to on Looking, in order to reveal that which was hidden to me, to see what I usually missed. I'll share with you how I came to this project, my approach, and a little bit of what I found. And perhaps it will provide an impetus for you to see something entirely new, even in the art with which you are familiar, or in the practice at which you're well practiced. I call this the observation of trifles, as a nod first to an artist, a writer, Arthur Conan Doyle, and second, as I'm sure many of you may be aware, his strong influence in his writing, his medical school professor, Dr. Joseph Bell. Doyle, as a medical student, was stunned at Bell's ability to identify a man's profession simply by looking. For instance, to notice a hobble on a man who approaches and see a worn spot on the inside of his trousers and identify him as a cobbler who must hold a smooth, heavy lapstone against their knees while hammering leather. A skill, he thought, for noticing the infinitely little detail. Doyle gave that skill, which is a skill for observation more than for learning, to his creation, Sherlock Holmes. In one of the novels, A Case for Identity, Holmes chides Watson for his lack of understanding of, quote, the importance of sleeves, the suggestiveness of thumbnails, or the great issues that might hang from a bootlace. And indeed, the length and condition of your sleeves, the state of your fingernails, and the integrity of your shoelaces might reveal something about your habits or your health. In fact, take a look at your nails, or better, take a look at the nails of the person next to you. If they'll let you. If they don't, that's also revealing. What are they like? Are they pebbled? Are they manicured? Is there dirt under the nails? Are they kept long, thus eliminating the possibility that you're sitting next to a pianist or a violinist? To introduce myself a bit, and which begins to explain a little bit of my approach, I am actually involved in neither art nor medicine, which is probably why I was invited today. For we're best able to see outside of our own perspectives, our own worldview, our own expertise, when we spend a few minutes fully engaging with someone else's perspective or worldview and vantage on the world. As intellectual tourists visiting a topic we don't practice and aren't schooled in, we might reawaken our ability to notice, to wonder, to not know something because you are all so good at knowing. And then we can flex that new observational muscle to see anew what's right in front of us. My actual field is animal researcher. I study, as was mentioned, dog cognition. So I am professionally an observer at some level of behavior of non-human animals, in particular dogs. I look at how dogs act with other dogs, with their people, and when alone, and I try to make inferences from that behavior to what they might know or understand about the world. For instance, I run simple behavioral experiments where I ask whether dogs can discriminate quantity by smell alone. They can. prefer a fair person who's treating themselves and another dog fairly to an unfair person. And in our latest study, we were looking at whether they can identify their own scent when smelled out of context and discriminate it from other dogs, the beginning of perhaps a sense of self. But the project I'm going to tell you about today is not about a dog's sense of self, as happy as I would be to talk to you about that too. Dogs are, in two ways, the entry to my project, Observing Trifles. First, by studying dogs, I in essence was studying, and I still study, that which is familiar to me, the most familiar thing. And to all of us, there are some 90 million dogs in America. So they're in our homes, they're underfoot, they're often in our beds. One might think we know everything about them already, right? So that's wrong. When I began studying dogs in the 90s, almost no one studied the cognition of dogs. All we had to go on was our intuition about their experience. I've thought of many reasons why this might be. One, they're not exotic animals, and we tend to study exotic animals. And two, they're not primates, and we're interested in those things that are just like us. Dogs were hard for me, and I think the whole scientific community, to see as possible subjects because they were just there right in front of us, familiar, known, or at least that's what we thought. Here's another way to think of it. This image, as you might recognize, shows the area of the back of the eye responsible for what we call the visual blind spot, the part of the visual field that we cannot see. The blind spot, in case you don't know, corresponds to where the optic nerve leaves the eye through the retina. So you see some veins approaching this spot. Where the nerve leaves, there are no photoreceptor cells on the retina. So the bit of the world that would have been reflected on that part of the retina is missing. We don't notice this, of course. We don't see a gap wherever we're looking because our brains fill it in. Dogs in cognitive science represent a kind of metaphoric blind spot, what we're looking straight at, but not seeing. So dogs helped me see that we often need to look again exactly at the things that we think we already know everything about. And dogs led me to my project in a second way. For the project I did take dozens of walks in the city around ordinary blocks, by which I mean not tour book blocks, not places people visiting the city go to see the city. I took these walks with very specific companions, people who have different expertise, different ways of looking at the world, and simply asked them to tell me what they saw. And of course, I got this specific idea about walking around the block together from dogs. As anyone who's lived with dogs, I've taken lots and lots of walks around the block. I've lived in cities for about 26 years, take a few walks a day, so maybe 1,000 a year, so about 26,000 walks around the block. One tends not to think of that time as a time of adventure and learning, but I did, over time, I realized, learn something, which was what is interesting on a walk to a dog. Even before I was a scientist, I'd gotten a little bit into my dog's head and started eyeing blocks that had fire hydrants or tree guards as thrilling, and those that had no posts of any kind as horrible. But it's not just preference. What the dog perceives and experiences of the walk that we seem to be sharing it became more and more clear to me, wildly different from what I was seeing and experiencing on that walk. So what I see here, for instance, is the entrance staircase to Riverside Park, where I used to walk together with one of my dogs. I see probably about what you see. I can tell the season, roughly the time of day. I happen to know where this leads, and I happen to know what the stones are made of. You can almost see, it's a little washed out, a bit of New Jersey in the background. But you stand and watch for 10 minutes, and you see what the dog sees of this scene. And this is, of course, why The dog's perception is utterly different. The scene is rewrought to an olfactory creature. It's an olfactory scene, and actually only one spot is perceived by the dog. Imagine I thought if my dog could share with me what she saw. And then imagine I began the thousands of other ways to see this very simple scene. For, as geographer Doreen Massey has said, space is not a flat surface across which we walk. You're cutting across a myriad of stories going on. At every point, you could stop and tell the history of that point, and it will be a trajectory. It will tell the story, perhaps for dogs, of the other dogs who have passed. Or for us, the story of a city, of the people who've made the city, of the people who have lived there. What are the stories in a static space that I hadn't noticed, that I don't notice every day as I do my walk to work, to home, to the store? There my project began. To explore the things on my own block that I simply didn't see, that I was now sleepwalking through, though they were right in front of me, I began taking walks around the block, and I began with myself. I began taking a walk around the block to notice things. This was the beginning of the block. This was my control condition, as it were. Despite my professional observer capacity, or maybe because of it, I didn't see that much. You know, I'd lived along this block for many years, and so I'd stopped seeing. I knew what I saw on the block. There was nothing new. Then I invited some 4 dozen people to walk with me one at a time. And these were people with varying expertise, as I said. And I chose people with a kind of expertise in most cases because we all look at the world from the context of our profession, right? This is what the French call déformation professionnelle. The psychiatrist might be symptoms of a diagnosable condition in everyone from the grocery checkout cashier to their spouse. You know, the economist sees the simple act of buying a cup of coffee as an example of a microeconomic phenomenon. This could be irksome if you're the spouse or you're going for coffee with the economist, but I saw these people as seers, able to bring my attention to an element of the scene in front of us that I would otherwise miss. So I asked them as we were walking to simply tell me what they saw, to narrate our walk with the running commentary that is in their head. So I want to just give you a few examples of the walkers that I went with and of the trifles that inevitably we saw. I walked with Paul Shaw, who is a calligrapher, a typography designer, a all-around kind of literaphiliac, someone who seeks and sees letters. So we took that scene and looked for text, essentially. And that would be on surfaces, underfoot, in front of us. There was plenty. And what one sees if one looks for this, with just this topic in mind, is, in my mind, the diversity of and kind of humor of letters in the city. So we had big-nosed P's, kind of squinty B's, jolly E's, a kind of tipsy G, and an inverted Q. He was very excited about this Q because it was a font he had never seen, a typeface he had never seen, reminding us actually of the imagination that can be in letters, but that we actually blunt out of our experience of words in this word doc world that we live in. And two, the type of lettering told us often about the kind of business or building that it sat on. And not only that, it might tell us something about when that building was made. Indeed, you could recreate a history of construction in New York City by looking at the lettering on buildings. The regularity in this city of Art Deco and Art Moderne lettering tells us that in the 20s and 30s, there was a large amount of construction, and a construction of a quality such that it has endured. So you can do some detectiving of the city, the history of the city, by lettering alone. I walked with a fellow named Charlie Eisman, who I called an insect tracker. He calls himself a field naturalist, and he's keen on finding not just insects, but also what he calls the little mystery objects, which are the spoor of insects, the sign that they've been there, something they've left behind. I contacted him after reading his Field Guide to Invertebrate Sign, probably a book you don't have, but I think you should. An incredible tour through the leavings of insects in North America. And what made me think that he could find interesting fodder in the city was a story that he told in that book. He and his co-author started out on a trip to visit all the country's national parks looking for insect sign, and they left from his parents' home. 5 hours later, his mother came out to find them in the driveway still, turning over maple leaves and looking in logs. You know, they'd found enough insect sign there to postpone for the moment their trip to the wilderness where real nature was to be found. So his eye went to the trees and plants, of course, but also to the interstices, the sidewalk cracks, the space between bricks, the fissures and joints of civilization. We saw things like this. If you don't see how exciting that is, as I suspect you might not, I'm going to draw your attention to this pathway. This is sign of a slug who, slugs don't have teeth, but they have a radula, a finely toothed tongue, all mollusks do, that as they move, they sweep along the surface, whatever surface they're moving on, eating the top layer of algae or whatever is there as they go. So this is a slug's gustatory path. This will probably be the only picture of slug radula marks you ever see, but I'm very proud to be showing it to you. The world basically teems with insects to a level you might not want to realize. If you don't see them right away, the great strategy of the insect tracker is to flip something over, and there will be something underneath, a leaf or a rock. I also learned that for every space, there is a bug who resides there on every surface. So we looked at this wood print, and as you get closer, it was covered with these chrysalises, ladybug pupæ, which the ladybugs left as they, in essence, molted out. So one doesn't need to be an expert in insect sign investigation or even really interested in insects to profit from this worldview. In New York City, I learned that one way to distinguish which trees are native to the area and which are invasive was to flip over some leaves, because the so-called invasive trees have very little sign. They rarely have one bug that has come to specialize in living in that tree. The native trees have committed bug populations and often are destroyed by them. I walked with my then 19-month-old son. I wasn't quite prepared for this one in the way I thought I should be, because he kind of rocked my conceptual world. He changed my idea of what it meant to go on a walk. Because for me, a walk is a simple matter at some level. When I told you I went for walks, you didn't think, what is that thing? We all know it's kind of a journey from A to B. But to a child, there's no such simple definition. For instance, a walk, according to my toddler, was regularly about not walking. It had nothing to do with points A or B or the getting from one to the other. The walk was a kind of investigatory exercise, which begins with energy and ends with complete exhaustion. It began in the elevator and continued through running through the building and then standing on the steps for 10 minutes. Actually, it began before the elevator in the activity of tying shoes or marching down the hall to tie shoes. A walk was exploring surfaces and textures with fingers and toes, and on one occasion, tongue. Standing still and seeing who or what comes by, trying out different forms of locomotion. It can be a run, it can be a march, it can be spinning, shuffling. And it was stopping to see every one of those candy wrappers. It was stopping to admire the breeze, to point, to share at things, to share things. So I looked where he looked. I let him lead the walk. And that was mostly 2 feet off the ground. And I tried to see what he saw without an adult sensibility, doing the looking for him. So here's what he showed me. Standpipes. I mean, maybe you've seen these, but have you ever really looked at them? Because they are really everywhere. There are 5 on our block, which told me something about our block suddenly. Standpipes are the backup water pressure systems for buildings which are 6 stories tall or taller. So you can see essentially the height of your street without looking above 1.5 feet off the ground, because it will have these identifying markers. There are dozens of varieties of these hydra, I now know because of him. He saw this, which I thought I understood, but I didn't. He was learning his letters, and so that's what he saw. He saw T's and Y's, and especially O's. O's were everywhere. O's were on signs and license plates, but they were also in the back of air conditioning units. They were also on a call button. They were also in a sidewalk crack. And so at some level, we rewrought this street as made of letters. He saw this, and this is what he wanted to point out to me, the acute isosceles triangles, which, having lived on this block, I had never seen. In other words, he showed me all the things I had stopped looking at, I had decided were not relevant for my perception of the block. I went for a listen, as Bonnie said, with Arlene Gordon, who became blind half a lifetime earlier in her 40s. She disavowed my claim that she might have some other supersensory ability, and we nonetheless took a walk. She used a cane, tapping it a few steps in front of her. So the tap of her cane turned out to draw a picture for her, a sound picture. See if you can see what she saw. She saw us approaching this awning in that audio clip. The tap that she was making bounces around the environment and comes back to her like it comes back to an echolocating little brown bat, telling something about the shape of objects around her. So we heard the car. You might have heard the wind. But she heard when the sound was more distinct and closer, because it was bouncing off of the underside of an awning. She did use the wind too, actually, that you probably heard. For her, she uses it to tell when she's at the end of a street at an intersection, because in a city like Manhattan, there is a change of wind direction on every block. And we learn to ignore it, but you can feel it yourself on your face. And for Gordon, people talking on their cell phones, the kind of bane of contemporary culture, were a great relief, because they were beacons of where people were on the sidewalk in front of her. I walked with a gentleman named John Hadidian, who is an urban wildlife researcher. So we looked for the places where wildlife are, which are the spaces between human existence. And we saw these. If you don't see, I'll zoom in. Between apartment buildings, there's a 1-inch space, which houses a community of dozens of sparrow residences. Something I, again, living a block away from this, had never before seen. Indeed, what we saw is that animals around us live in the kind of parallel universe, using our habitats, using our food, and raising their own families in the hours when we retreat, in the spaces which we retreat from. And we saw how the face of a building mimics the face of a rock cliff. A building like a cliff supports an ecosystem. It has areas where the wind doesn't hit, where plant life can flourish, and it has little cornices where a small animal might scamper or a winged animal can land. Cliff animals, incidentally, include mice, various squirrels, birds, raccoons. Do these sound familiar? These are urban animals. And there's, in fact, a hypothesis called the urban cliff hypothesis that animals who are living around Homo erectus and in caves have simply followed us into the city with our new man-made caves. I did, of course, walk with my dog, and I had some sense where we would be looking. But I let him lead. Part of what I started doing in walks with my dog is taking occasional smell walks, which were our walks defined by where and how long he wants to smell whatever it is that he's smelling, not defined by my desire to get around the block in a certain amount of time, or to get him to exercise, or to get him to pee. And we saw things like this. So once you think about a dog who might be sniffing for a long time, this is actually a horrifying prospect. The balusters. We know they have some good smells for dogs, but if you watch sniffing, I got the distinct impression that each baluster's smells were different. They're telling tales of passing dogs, and in fact, they're telling the tale potentially of passing time. For the difference in concentration of odor from the first to third baluster, a trained dog can distinguish, and can tell, therefore, which way the dog leaving that smell went, because the newer one will be a stronger concentration of odor. I refrained from sniffing them myself, but I admired and followed his nose. In following his nose, he also pulled me to an unfamiliar doorway and insisted that we stay there on someone else's doorway with no one there. But a few minutes later, out came a woman I recognized from morning dog walks, and she confirmed what Finnegan had smelled, which was that she had just gone in with her dog 10 minutes before. He saw her past presence still on the street, and so is the street rendered by dogs. It sees the smells by those who have long since passed, but left behind odors in their wake. I walked with Sidney Hornstein, who is a geologist at the Museum of Natural History. He described the world as being for him either minerals or biomass. So we looked for the minerals, which turns out to be nearly everything. For the sidewalk, the street, the buildings are all stones. And more important, they're stones from somewhere at some time. For instance, this was the face of my building, which turned out to have on it this. This might not look that profound to you if you have not ever taken a geology class. It's a limestone building. Limestone is the sediment from the seafloor, the sea that 300 million years ago used to be in the place which is now about Indiana. And what it is mostly made of are the remains of the animals who lived in that sea. That's most of what the limestone is. And so you see here actually there are little crinoids, which are discs, and then these little shell-shaped things. These are pelecypods, shells of bivalves. My entire building is made up of fossilized remains of these sea creatures from 300 million years ago. That surprised me. We saw these as well. This is another limestone low wall. And these squiggly lines are ancient marine worm tracks for when they burrowed through the sediment in the sea, eating their way along. The traces are the paths chemically changed from passing through the worm's digestive system and then fossilized when the worm moved on. So ancient marine worms from 300 million years ago featured on your street. I walked with Fred Kent of the Project for Public Spaces, which he founded after working with William White, the great urban sociologist. So we looked at people, essentially, on the streets and sidewalks, and we looked at how the streets worked or didn't work for the people and how people used them. And how, despite this, more or less the winter version of what it looks like a half a block away on Fifth Avenue right now, we rarely bump into each other in a dense city while walking. Urban pedestrian behavior, especially in New York City, is quick and fluid and largely unconscious, a kind of cooperative dance that we don't know we're dancing. As it turns out, there's research on ant swarming and bird flocking, and especially fish schooling, that shows that there are a few simple rules that these animals follow to avoid congestion when there are hundreds of thousands or thousands of individuals. We use the same rules, researchers have found, to avoid bumping into each other, and they're these. Alignment, keep up with those next to you. Stay comfortably close. Avoidance, avoid bumping by keeping an even distance from each other based on your personal space. So personal space for fish is a little different than personal space for humans. And different people, obviously, from different cultures have different personal space. But also attraction. Follow whoever's in front of you. It doesn't matter if the one in front of you is leading. In fact, they don't know they're the leader. But if you follow them, and as the group turns, you get a new leader, you avoid bumping. We do this same thing unconsciously. And we see violations of this from those who are not in our school. In other words, clusters of tourists, texters. These people are not even using their ancient fish brains. Another walker with whom I looked at people was Bennett Lorber, who was a doctor specializing in physical diagnosis. So a kind of worldview that many of you already have. We viewed those walking toward us or away from us on the sidewalks as though they were submitting, basically, to a gait test, to a test of diagnosis. And in that way, we could see people who needed hip surgery, who had stenotic spines based on their gait. We saw a person who had a genetic disorder of the 23rd chromosome, right, by their physical appearance walking toward us, a kind of real-life X-ray of their conditions. I've spared sharing with you, although I wish I had the technology to do it, what he and others can smell on people. I don't know how much you use smell in your practice, but it used to be quite common to smell people for their disease. For instance, the putrid smell on breath that indicates an anaerobic infection. The sweet, rotted fruit smell of diabetes, and so forth. And finally, I walked with the artist Myra Kalman. She showed me which was in many respects the adult version of that kind of childlike appreciation for the ordinary. For instance, we looked at the trash, the cast-off furniture and other leavings amid the fetid black bags on the streets of New York. Alfred Kazin, writing about walking in early 20th century New York City, spoke of the nude, shamed look of furniture, which is left outdoors as trash. Myra brought my attention to it and then re-rendered, for instance, this couch under our gaze into something elegant again. Kalman also showed me something about space in the city. She liked to talk to strangers and go into buildings, both of which made me very uncomfortable. But what I realized and what I saw simply through her way of trespassing through it was that there's an interesting collision of private and public spaces that you're walking through every time you walk down the street. So for instance, there's the private space, the personal space around ourselves that we carry with us, but we're walking on a public space, the sidewalk. We encounter things like newspaper stands, which are private, mailboxes, which are private public, federally owned, buildings which are private mostly, but in co-ops, for instance, in the city, you own not the building, but kind of an abstracted space within that building. If a building's door is opened, you, the public, might be invited in, but only on certain terms. Kalman traipsed right through all of these, therefore bringing them into relief. The result of this project for me was that my walks were forever changed. There is infinitely much to see in the simplest scene. And now I have the opportunity to flex that attentional muscle. And I want to encourage it as an opportunity, not as a mandate. There's no mandate to look at these things, but there's a chance to look again, to reframe our ordinary scene and thereby collect moments like these. Right now, you might see this in the city underfoot. The city is now proselytizing for me, I think, out of a concern for pedestrian accidents, not out of a concern for the importance of looking. But I'll take the reminder, look. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bonnie and Wendy, for having me. Bonnie tells me I have about 15 minutes if there are any questions. And there are microphones being passed about. The questions are the best part, so please ask questions.
Thanks very much. I enjoyed both of your books.
Thank you.
And this is a question that I think is important to a lot of us here. You are an enthusiastic and liberal footnoter.
That's exactly right.
I am interested in the way you think it's a kind of a distraction from the attention that we're paying to the body of the text, but it also enhances our understanding and the ways in which we deal with it. How do you think about it conceptually or as a writer?
Yeah, very similarly. It's true. I argue with my publisher a lot about footnotes because they don't want to put them in popular press books because they make them seem scholarly, academic, and then there are people who won't pick up a book where there's really tiny type at the bottom of the page. But what seems to me perfect about the format is that it's opening a portal that you can follow. You can go this way, out this door, right? But you don't have to. You can continue with the main body of the text and stay there. But there is a lot to be said in every direction from, you have to choose carefully, but from many points. And I want to give those opportunities always. There's a great footnote. I've written about footnotes actually a little bit, and one of my favorites is a guy named Nicholson Baker, a novelist who also writes nonfiction, wrote a whole book, The Mezzanine, which is mostly footnotes about traveling up an escalator. Actually, that's the whole book, Traveling Up an Escalator. And the footnotes are all the sensory, memorial, experiential segues that you have, following all this paths in your mind. I think it's important. I liked Myra's ducking into, following some footnote into a building I'd never been in or even thought of being in. We always found something there. Thanks. Right here in front.
Yes, I'm John Sadler from UT Southwestern. I'm a psychiatrist. I was really interested in the way you had your lookers accompany you, and it seems to me that not only did they not just look, but they started asking questions about what they were looking at, and so that there was a certain engagement, a reciprocity in a certain sense with the observer and the observed. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about how we can enhance our questioning of what we're looking at.
I think you're right. A social presence is really important in that case. My context is not ideal, but there is a great tradition, too, of walking and communicating, right? Just covering space. The peripatetic philosophers that just, if you're stuck, go for a walk. So going for a walk with a person seemed to me actually the ideal format. Actually, the harder part was this moment before that, which was getting them to say what they saw. Often people don't know what they see, so I would have to sort of prompt them with questions about reminding them of their professional hats that they were wearing, essentially. Sort of saying it out loud, and that would give them the license to start talking about the things that they know, and then it became relevant to that which they were seeing. So we weren't in an art studio, we weren't in front of a geology display or in a clear geological area, but they got that mindset in their minds and then could apply it to what was right in front of them. I was asking questions along the way and also trying to observe, which was actually impossible to do, these things at once, listen, ask questions, and observe for myself. But mostly, once they got started, they just continued a narrative. Because getting started was the hard part, and I could help with that. But if you think about, your walk down the street, my guess is that every one of you is talking to yourself throughout, right? It might not be about the most profound things. In my mind, they're very not profound often. But once that narrative started coming out of their mouth, and I allowed it by simply acknowledging it, it continued. I never had a problem with somebody stopping talking once I got them started. Thanks. Way in the back?
Yes, I had a question about very much that process. Goethe used to say, the eye doesn't see what the mind doesn't know. So it seems to me that your observers had a lot of knowledge, which guided what they were able to see. And conversely, what they were able to see because of their knowledge fostered their knowledge. So it becomes a catch-22. And if I have to come up with a common denominator, is curiosity. Which is, in our hyper-specialized and omnivorous curiosity, which in our high-specialized world is clearly a casualty. So how do you foster that?
Well, it's interesting. They didn't have to be good attenders or really even curious at all. They just had to be good at the one thing and willing to talk to me about it. And then I could kind of concatenate all those experiences to see the richness of the block. But every one of them actually would end these walks with a kind of apology. I don't pay very good attention. By the way, attention is a very complicated process. And none of them thought they could pay attention. They were just talking about what they knew. It was not even that they thought I have this special expertise. They're just saying the way they think the world looks, right? I began to think that even though I had chosen people with expertise, which I thought would be interesting on these walks, I could walk with anybody. All I needed was a point of view which was different than mine. And actually, the only real requirement was that they would be willing to tell me what they saw. There were a number of people I didn't write up in the book, although they were experts, and I wanted to know what they saw because they couldn't tell me. It was so implied. It was so implicit. They couldn't make it explicit, and that was police detectives. But I wanted them to tell me why does that person look suspicious? What is the suspicious thing? I walked with two. Both could identify me as the person they were supposed to meet, having never met before. Why did I look like a person who walks around the block with strangers dozens of times? What is that look? How am I open or not? They couldn't tell me. It was a kind of visceral feeling. But other than that, I think you almost didn't need an expertise. You just need a point of view and a willingness to share it. Yeah, right next to him.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
What do you think of Garth Stein's book, The Art of Racing in the Rain? Do you think he represented Enzo as too humanoid?
Right, that's a dog book question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard. There are a lot of biographies and autobiographies. I mean, it's terrifically interesting and a great story. Is it a dog? Is it what's in a dog's mind? No, almost certainly not. I think our imagination is way too restricted when thinking about what it might be like to be even somebody else, let alone a member of another species. And I think you have to, to imagine something nonverbal, you have to go to you get yourself into a different perceptual space. And he did that a little bit, but that's not what he was trying to do. He was trying to make a story of another figure. We see ourselves reflected in other animals. Yeah, right at the back.
So in listening to your talk, I'm really struck with the overlap with mindfulness practice. A
Right.
lot of it is it's being present, focused attention, even when you're talking about walking, that the walking meditation. I did a driving meditation when I was going through the Lincoln Tunnel that helped a lot.
Excellent.
but I know it's been represented in labyrinths and Chartres and other meditative spheres. So I wonder for you how mindfulness practice or meditation overlaps with the work you're doing.
Thanks. It does overlap, I think. It wasn't what I intended to do. And at some level, even though in broad strokes, it represents, my approach represented a real openness to everything, I wasn't really open in every walk, right? In some ways, I was very closed in every walk, and I was trying to see what one person was seeing. I was trying to see the world through one person's provincial worldview. So it was an openness that was achieved through being closed. I thought that was kind of interesting. One other thing, I did walk with a professor of psychology who's well known for her work on mindfulness, Ellen Langer, at Harvard. And we had a funny walk as we were walking along. This is a professor of mindfulness, and I thought this is going to be, we're going to see a lot. And as we were walking along, she insisted on taking her dog. So I was walking with one of the dogs, so the slow dog, and I was a step behind Ellen, and she was speaking, and the dog sniffed something on the ground. I looked down, and it was a $20 bill. Ellen had just stepped over it. And then there was another one, and then there was a third right in front of us. And I said, Ellen, there's $60, right? And you just stepped over it. And she said, well, you can't see everything. Right here, Irving.
About 3 comments before about your eye only sees what the mind knows.
Yeah.
This has very practical application in medicine. When you're teaching medical students and you've graduated and you're becoming a doctor. And so it turns out that physicians, takes about 10 years for physicians to really become superb clinicians. And what I mean by that is they begin to see things in patients, hear things from patients that we have never taught them. And these are the things we often refer to as pearls. And so how do you get the medical student or the intern to get to that 10-year point earlier?
Right.
And so one of the ways in which we're trying to do it with their observational skills is by giving them this experience of looking at something they know nothing about and find the details. But a very simple way is there are 4 magic words, and they are, is there anything more? And so you ask a student to describe, take a history, and they tell you what's what, and then you say, is there anything more? And if they keep going back each time, eventually they extract all that information, and then finally it becomes sort of second nature. And so, you go and see a patient. Say you're taking a walk with a gastroenterologist, and you meet someone who's burping, and you might ask a simple question, but he might ask 12 questions to get to the point. And so is there anything more? And I think this is a simple question that you can ask to stimulate someone to look further. So it's another way of saying deep looking.
Look again.
Look again.
Great. I like it very much. Yeah, thanks. The doctor with whom I walked, Bennett Lorber, told me that he likes his practice, which will be parallel to, I think, an approach many of you will take. In his practice, he'll bring around residents to see a patient, and then they'll talk to the patient for a minute, and then he'll have all the residents turn and look at the wall, and he'll say, tell me one thing about the patient. And he calls on someone, and they say, well, she has an IV in her left arm. And then they say, anything else? And they can't remember anything else. And he says, then I call on someone else, and she says, I was going to say she has an IV. And then Bennett would rattle off all the things he had noticed by doing that exercise in his head, anything more. The photos by the bedside, the Bible in her lap, the necklace that she's wearing, that she's in her own pajamas, not a hospital gown, all those things which are giving a picture, the idea of the color of one's skin being darker than the familial members, that's the great example. And so he does that himself, and he says the next time the residents go in the room, they're all peering in a perhaps peculiar way for the patient, way at the patient. Thanks. There was somebody right in the middle who was waiting. Yeah, last question.
Thank you. So I really loved listening to you. What
Thank
you
you.
saw and what your companions in your walk saw is interesting. But listening to you, I think just your use of language is really, it was flowery and beautiful and evoked a sense of calmness for me specifically. And it just got me to think that in addition to the power of observation and just sort of teaching our residents and our medical students to observe, maybe we should also be teaching a corresponding language, because there's something really beautiful about sitting here for an hour or 45 minutes actually and just listening to you that was different from the content of what you spoke. And so we teach a whole new language as in this sort of transformative experience of when these very bright, ambitious, accomplished individuals apply to medical school. We brainwash them and we sort of have them come out at the other end of the car wash, and we wonder why it's harder for them to connect, and we have to reteach that to them. And there's something about both the use of language and the teaching of a certain language that might be something that I might walk away from this conference in wanting to explore further. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that. Thank you.
I feel like I'm going to have a new appreciation for my dogs wandering when I just want to get back. I am trying very hard to keep us on time, and we're succeeding so far. So in that vein, I would ask that you are back in a seat in the theater by 11:45 when the next session will begin. If you just stay put, though, there are a few other important housekeeping announcements. When you come back in, again, we really need every seat. So if you would fill in all the way to the middle, there are a few seats down in the front, because I see a few people standing in the back, but there are some seats down here. A correction from earlier, you only have a MoMA ticket for today in your folder, and tomorrow we'll have the stack of tickets for tomorrow so you don't have to remember them. When you leave, now you can also sign up for the tours tomorrow, the teaching demonstrations, as well as if you didn't sign up for the idea exchanges this afternoon, the sign-ups are both outside on 2 different walls. Please only attend the sessions that you signed up for, because the number of lines were the number of chairs, especially for the tours. The restaurant list for lunch is in your bag. This is not lunch yet. This is just a 15-minute break. And I think that's it. So please be back in your seat by 11:45. Thank you.
Megan, how are you? Fabulous, great, good to see you. David, how are you? Nice to see you. You're the magician, is that right? Closet magician, okay. Good. Yeah. Okay, good. I'm going to do 2. I'm just plugging in, great. Good, good. This is Dr. Kent. Great, thank you. It's a bad time. I'm just about to. Responsibilities, including this plenary that I'm about to open. So, all right. Okay, good. Thank you. Perfect. Thanks so much. That was great. That was really fun. Oh, good. I don't have a book. I want to get it. I'm going to get a copy for me and a copy for Shaw. Shaw will be here tomorrow.
Yes.
So you'll see him.
No, I won't.
Oh,
I
you
gotta go
will.
tomorrow. Will you say
Oh,
hello
I
to
wasn't
me?
sure what time you were going to. Yes, I will absolutely say hello to you. I'm just going to plug this in here. I can figure out how to Yes. Monica, how are you?
Yes, I know, right? Like, at some point, you should see the whites in each other's eyes.
I've seen your eyes. I've seen your pictures. I have them up here. But I haven't seen them in person. I'm just actually going to pull them up right here so that I can introduce everybody appropriately. This is my, oops.
Yep.
That's my little one-line summary. Is that okay? Of what you guys do?
100%. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
It's my team. Did you guys coordinate your patterns and your coloring today? It's very
Right.
nice. Very, very stylish. Good. And Lisa, good to see you in person. Yes, yes. We spoke on the phone. Yeah, a while ago. Great. Fabulous. No, no. Bonnie gets all. I'm just simply the timekeeper. I'm going to run to the boys' room real quick and I'll be right back. Okay, good. This must be the clicker, forward, backward.
Okay.
Right here. Let's just make sure our
Yeah,
slides are
that's-
teed up. just do a test run? Yeah. There we go. Okay, good.
Okay.
Good.
Great. And
Joel, this one just is introductory, and then it goes right into it. So, and you tried that breathing roll through yesterday, your, go, you said, I would say. Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna try so hard not to chat. I mean, not
Fabulous.
translation, it's just.
We're going to invite you up to the podium.
I think so. I need to.
All of you, and then the
I'm gonna do that.
Oh, she was? Did she have a good time?
Yeah, I went to Penn, so I can do that. So a little bit.
Great.
And we have 7 minutes. The good news is we're going to lunch, so we don't have anyone to bump up against and can't pick us out.
How much time do we have? So they saw people who live with these. Is that correct? 4 minutes.
They're not going to be on time coming back.
Yeah, that's true. All right, I'm gonna run to the restroom.
So we're next to because somebody just chatted me the fun fact Philadelphia. Yeah, I won't talk about this one because you'll hear about it. But we actually have 2 other, we have 3 med school partners. Each program is completely different. They're all in the room, which is nice. But I'm only presenting. It's a different year than what I have. So
I live in New York and I've sent to Philly a fair bit already. So, I mean, once in a while, I think I'm going to December. I mean, I often go.
I'm particularly excited that they were all
Strap on
even if they're not represented in terms of their curriculum. But this, but I feel like Cooper's model as a
Yeah,
is
let me tell you.
the most interesting of the 3 vertical partners because they can
Email is super easy. And it's,
That's cool.
it's like first initial and last name, A-H-O-R.
So that also makes the med school classes novel.
Yeah.
To that part, not just partnership. Right, yeah, which is interesting. And Jefferson Medical College, not since the 1840s.
They have some of the great elements being here at Jefferson.
Not anymore.
Oh, is that right?
They tried to sell it, so we saved it.
They tried to sell it.
It was a whole hullabaloo. Alice Walker Sayers of Walmart purchased by the to take to Bentonville, Arkansas, to Crystal Bridges. He always is there.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Okay.
2006, you can tell, right?
Thank you.
Wow, I missed that story.
How are you doing?
It goes over the patrimony
You
of
were
Philadelphia.
terrific.
There was a
Oh, good.
document contract that said she could have it unless the city of Philadelphia matched the offer price within 30 days.
It just sort of got,
And
so
by the
started
way,
talking
the
and then
egg-
they have.
I went to Steve
but
woke up the
when
next
the egg
day
was
and was in the
says,
middle of a $63 million fundraising campaign in 30 days. Ridiculous.
Yes, of course.
No. I'm calling thank you letters.
Probably gonna illustrate.
But yeah, so it's still in Philly. South
But it's no longer at Jefferson.
No, they have a facsimile of it, like a, but it's shared now between Philadelphia and Napa. It moves back and forth every 4 or 5 years. Yeah, they used the frame as an ashtray when you could still smoke in medical school and then put your cigarette out on a painting. Hello.
Nice to meet you.
2-minute warning. I probably could if I was smart.
So I get up there a lot, and I was just.
So you're part of the AAMC?
Well, I was the first chairman of the board when we reorganized.
All good.
And
Yeah,
I'm a
just trying to-
distinguished service member of the WNC, but Daryl Kirch, you know Daryl, he's the CEO. He called me up and he said, listen, you've forgotten more about this field than I'll ever know. So how about you go and then tell me what we should do? So that's why I'm here.
Okay. Okay, so you come to New Haven periodically?
For the board meetings. I'm there a half a dozen times a year, and I always make sure I get to the Mellon Center and to the art gallery. You know what, I'll do that sometime. Yeah, I would enjoy that. Yeah. Nice to chat.
Please mosey to your seats, please. We're going to get started in just a moment.
Hi.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We don't want to raise Bonnie's wrath, so we better stay on time. And I can already see the clock is ticking. My name is Joel Katz, and I am a general internist, infectious disease specialist, and medical educator at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And the first thing I want to do is just thank Bonnie for having had the vision, the energy, the chutzpah to put something like this together with so many people whose interests are very diverse yet overlap in a core passion around improving medical care through this unusual method. Many audiences I talk to, I have to explain to them how art and medicine are possibly connected, but I'm sure in this group I don't have to do that. Bonnie asked me to just say a word about myself, which I did do, and we have a wonderful panel that I'm going to introduce, and our task in the next 45 minutes is to give you 3 examples of very different programs from around the country that are representative of the many different programs that Bonnie's drawn together, and start to stimulate the conversation and the discussion. So at the end of the panel, there will be time for conversation, questions, comments. I've already learned that this crowd is not shy, and so once we get to that piece, we're going to have you come to the microphones, say who you are and where you're from, and then ask us as many questions as you can. The art and medicine are linked together in ways that I don't need to explain, but I'm going to go into a few bits of it. And in my mind, today's question is today and tomorrow's question is, how can you exploit the advantages of both to improve the patient experience, ultimately, or medical education as a way to improve the patient experience? We did a survey at Harvard a few years ago as we were putting together our Arts and Humanities Initiative, and surveyed the entire faculty, resident, fellow, medical student, and dental student body. And you can see it's a large group. 13,500 people were surveyed, and we got about a 20% response rate, which is pretty good. And what you can see, if I can get this pointer, is that a very large percentage of people who are in the medical field have a close active link to one or more of the arts. 65% of people were actively engaged as a participant, a musician, or viewing and hearing music regularly. And you can see the other areas of the arts, and even visual arts, about a third of people actively engaged in arts. So this is a group that's already well engaged. The links go way back. Oh, just one thing to mention. The second question we asked them in our survey, a little self-serving, is can medical education at Harvard Medical School be enhanced by the arts and medicine? And in agree or strongly agree, 2/3 of the people did, which helped propel our movement. And I should just shout out to Lisa Wong right there, who's the president of our organization, who's here today. The links go way back, as illustrated here or depicted by Van der Weyden. This hangs at the MFA. It's a fabulous painting of St. Luke, the third apostle. He was an artist himself. He is attributed the religious fresco that he discovered this. I don't know if it's true or not, but some people say he invented the religious fresco. He was a Greek physician himself, and he's said to be the only person who ever drew Jesus and Mother Mary from live, from the flesh, life drawing. Historically, unfortunately, he lived about 150 years after them, so it's highly unlikely that happened, but we're not going to worry about that. And the links are deep, as I said, and another way, in my mind, to illustrate the links is to think about the brain and how the brain works. As a physician, that's how I think. And they're both art and medicine utilize the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain collectively, being able to see the big picture and the small details, being able to balance ambiguity, accept multiple possible hypotheses in your brain without premature closure. Those are aspects of both professions that I think are closely linked. And it's illustrated by this test that we give our patients, the Ray Ostrich complex figure test, which is a visual spatial test that helps differentiate where brain lesions are. And you ask the patient, you show them this picture, and you ask them to draw the picture. And depending on what the pathology is, they will come up with different patterns of responses. And so, for example, this is a patient in whom the details are very clearly evident, but they've lost the sense of the big picture, okay? And this is someone who has a left brain lesion. And this is the opposite, someone where the big picture is visible, but they've lost all the details. And it's a very, very clear association between how the two sides of the brain work together. So with that as an introduction, I just want to expand a little bit on Dr. Braverman's history that he gave this morning of this field from my perspective. When I look back in the 1960s and 70s, there were very small pilots of artists who were physicians who were using art in medical education. For example, there was a New York surgeon who used to have his surgical residents come in at 4 in the morning and do life drawing so that they could be back at the wards to round on their patients by 5:30 in the morning. And his view was that this was a way of expanding their vision of spatial relationships and also of the patient as a whole. Those types of studies that were done were really very observational, and they're more reported in memoirs than they are actually in literature. There's not much in the literature. In the 1970s, Robert Coles, who was a pediatric psychiatrist, wrote a beautiful essay in 1979 in the New England Journal of Medicine where he outlined some lapses that he had noticed in the patients he cared for, professional lapses. And the point he was making that all the physicians who made those lapses were very well-trained physicians. They knew the science, they knew the technical aspects of care, but the lapses that were made were professional lapses, and they were lapses that were taught by the great authors and novelists of our time. That if you had read Graham Greene or you had read other great writers, you would have learned those lessons. And his point was that medicine had perhaps the pendulum had gone too far, and the arts and the humanities had been removed from medical education in ways that were detrimental. In the 1980s, there was a number of, really in the nursing field, of nurse educators who used art. And there's a number of articles in that area, used art to enhance nursing skills. And there was a wonderful book written by Jerry Berg, a nurse educator in Illinois, on visual arts and nursing education that is, I think, was seminal. In the 1990s, as you've heard at Yale, they pioneered the sort of quantitation of this methodology. And since that time, since that article in 2001, a number of programs have been popping up around the country, very disparate, very individualized, looking at local needs, local activities, local resources. The field has come a long way since that. That's why we're here in this room. It's wonderful to see so many people together. And in addition, it's documented by the current edition of the Journal of Museum Education. This just came out last week. And the articles are focused on using art museums as a way to train healthcare workers. And I should just mention that one of the co-editors of this edition is Brooke, who's on our panel today. This is the role that, as a medical educator, that I feel I'm in, the middle manager, okay? This is the ultimate middle manager. You have a group of people who you report to above you and a people below. And if you remember, this is Prometheus, and he was charged by the gods to take care of the humans. He saw their plight, he saw their misery, and he gave them fire as a way to improve their lives, and for that he was punished with eternally having a large eagle peck out his liver every day, okay? And as a medical educator, I feel that, I encourage our other educators and the educators around me to think about two things. One is, what is the competency that we want to develop? That's where we, as the usual, starting point. What's the problem that we're addressing? And then part two is, after the method, how do we assess whether or not we've been able to come to that and successfully? And this is my residents put together a little version of that for me because they know how I feel. In preparation for today, I just did a very simple search. I went into PubMed and I matched the words art, medical education, and either visual or museum. So a little very crude survey. There are 158 articles tagged in Medline, PubMed, of which many were excluded because they were really off target. They were on art therapy, they were on medical illustration, they were on medical history. But the ones that were relevant were 68 articles in the last 25 years, and I'm just going to give you a quick cross-section of those. The vast majority, 90%, were from the United States, but there were others from Canada, Great Britain, Netherlands, Israel, some other places. They were largely, 80%, in the physician literature, but as I mentioned, there's quite a bit in the nursing literature here, and I think we need to acknowledge that. And then increasingly, there was this interprofessional or interdisciplinary group that I think is an emerging group and a really wonderful area that some of you are working in. And if you hone in on those 68 articles, about half of them are related to clinical care. How do you improve? Can you use this method to improve clinical care? And about half of them are related to professionalism, improving teamwork, improving communication, patient-centeredness, empathy, et cetera. And then there's a scattered few around the technology, art making, methods of doing this, and a couple of reviews. So and as I scanned the literature, I would say that two observations. One is that it's a moving target. I think the area of professionalism is more recent and it's emerging, and that is reflected in the syllabus of today's presentations, which are the majority, I would say 3/4, are in some areas of professionalism. This is just a quick reminder of this dichotomy that emerges in medicine with the physician here depicted by Picasso as the cold, dispassionate scientist, and has deferred over the care of the patient to the nun in this case. And I think it is a real dichotomy in medicine where medical education has moved very much to technical aspects and away from the humanistic aspects, and hopefully this movement will change the tide. All right, and I'm actually going to just skip through this real quickly. These are some of the things I think about when I look at programs, and these are some of the things I've asked the panelists to talk about. The goals of the program. and these are some of the types of goals, and this is just a small sampling. The curricular methods, we heard about VTS, we heard about art making, many, many other ways of addressing some of these issues that I think you'll all learn from your colleagues and we're going to learn from our panelists today. The timing in training, some occur in the preclinical years, some occur in the clinical years, some occur after the professional habits have been formed in senior faculty. This is an important issue. There's pros and cons to each method, and I think we'll learn from each other. Some of our programs are required, some are elective. In the elective versions, you may say we're self-selecting for the people who don't actually need what we're doing. And in the required side of it, you've got a third of the people who are very antagonistic, potentially starting out, and what do you do with them? Defining and measuring relevant outcomes, and what I would say here is that there's a plenary on this later, but the ultimate outcome, in a sense, is can you improve patient care? That's a very high bar to prove, but I would say in some ways that's really what's most important. And then finally, opportunities to improve the medical center and the museum collaboration, which we're going to talk about. So with that as background, I want to acknowledge the many, many people who I've worked with and who all of us work with. This is really a collaborative activity, as you all know. Many of my collaborators are in this audience. And the first group I want to point to is the patients themselves. We in many of our courses that we run at Harvard, we involve patients in it, and they are perhaps the best and most important teachers, collaborators. The trainees, the residents, some of whom are depicted here. And then the fabulous relationships that I've gained with many of my arts educator colleagues, many of whom are right here. And I think it's that partnership. The predictor of success, in my experience, is the partnership between a strong arts champion and a strong medical education champion working in parallel. And we're going to see that today on our panel. So we have three groups who are presenting today. They've been selected, in a sense, to reflect different approaches to these types of issues. And I'm going to, even though I haven't been able to do it, I'm going to ask them to stick to their 7 minutes. And I'm going to introduce each of them, the three groups, and then have them come up, and at the end there will be questions. Our first group is from Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, Harvard Medical School, and the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Brooke DiGiovanni Evans is the head of gallery learning at the MFA in Boston. She oversees 80 gallery programs each month for students of all ages. Brooke has worked in art, in science, in natural history, and at history museums. She currently serves as the board president for the National Museum Education Roundtable, and she holds a Master's of Education and Museum Sciences certificate from Harvard. Next to her is Celeste Royce, who is an obstetrician, gynecologist, generalist, and co-director of the OBGYN residency at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. She is the director of their ambulatory unit, whose main focus is patient safety, medical education, and addressing the health disparities. Her interests outside of work include music, running, kayaking, outdoors, and spending time with her family. And the two of them will tell you about a program that focuses on physician wellness at the resident level, very challenging population to take care of, and they also have been successful in implementing an assessment program that they're going to tell you about. Our second group, if I can get this technologically, give me a second, are in the middle. And first over there is Lisa Churcheo, who is an assistant professor of medicine at Cooper Medical School of Rowan University and teaches and a teaching fellow at the Academy of Master Educators. She currently serves as the Associate Program Director for the Internal Medicine Residency, where she develops novel curricula, mentors, and facilitates quality improvement and patient safety initiatives. She is the course director of the Medical Humanities program and leads the Wellness Initiative at the medical school and hospital. And next to her is Monica Zimmerman. Monica is the director of museum education at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And they collaborate not only with Cooper Medical School, but with other medical schools in the Philadelphia area. She is a lecturer in museum studies graduate program of the University of the Arts, and she received her MA from the University of the Arts in Museum Communication and a BA from Goshen College in English. And together they're going to tell you about one of their programs, which focuses on building clinical skills and putting it into a historical context. They incorporate art making, which is very unique, and art therapy, and they have a very, unlike the first program, they have a very wide range of student participants. And our third group that we're very lucky to have here from University of South Florida are on the end. And we'll start with Megan Voller, who is an associate curator and art in health program and director at the University of South Florida Contemporary Art Museum, where she organizes exhibitions and educational programs. She also maintains a practice as a visual art critic. Megan holds degrees in studio art, media studies, and art history. And next to her is David Ecker, who is assistant professor of hospital medicine at the University of South Florida, where he plays a large role in the development, innovation, and delivery of undergraduate medical education. His interests in medical education include competency-based education, clinical skills development, interprofessional training, and simulation. Nationally, Dr. Ecker is a member of the Society of General Internal Medicine's Education Committee and is the Advocacy and Advancement Chair of the Directors of Clinical Skills Courses. And he also, if you read your program, is a amateur magician. And they are going to talk about a program that they use in a very different way to catalyze faculty development. So with no further ado, I invite Celeste and Brooke to come on up.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and I'd like to thank Bonnie and Joel for the opportunity for us to present today. Museum of Fine Arts has been doing medical programs, hosting them and leading them for about 13 years now, and I personally have been teaching them for about 7 years. I'd like to do just a quick shout out to some colleagues that are here today that have made really important contributions to these programs: Ray Williams, Corinne Zimmerman, Mariah Quinn, and also Joel Katz.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you about our Night at the Museum program. This is a program that we started in 2014, and it was inspired by me attending a Harvard Medical School Academy presentation that Dr. Katz and Brooke were at. And they outlined some previous programs that had been developed. I was in the process of developing a curriculum for a residency preparation elective for fourth-year medical students going into OBGYN, which is known in the vernacular as a boot camp, which I recognize is a little bit dissonant from what we're trying to do here, which is instill wellness and self-reflection and self-care. But at any rate, I was trying to develop this curriculum, and I wanted to emphasize to the students at this very pivotal point in their development as physicians how important it is to pay attention to our own well-being, to develop habits of self-reflection and self-care. And so I stumbled on this program. It started in 2014. It started with the fourth-year medical students, and we since have been able to use that pilot program to go on to start a wellness initiative in our residency. The program that we perform with the residents is in the evenings. It is outside of clinical time, and it's in what's called protected time for the residents. And the first year that we did it, we had actually 24 participants. It was a voluntary activity, and we evaluated it by using a validated survey called the Perceived Stress Survey, both before and immediately after the program. So the goals of our program were to provide a very convenient, doable, short activity, so ideally suited to residents and fourth-year medical students, that promotes wellness and emphasizes the importance of self-care and self-reflection, that also helps to decrease their stress level, and to also, on the resident side, because these are people who are working in teams and who are ideally providing patient-centered care, to improve their ability to communicate with one another and function as team members. So we want to design an accessible activity and an activity where they would develop mindfulness and self-reflection.
So to give you a quick sense of what the activity includes in their time in the museum, when they arrive, we do a quick introduction, reminding them, which I think we've referenced earlier from other speakers, there are no emergencies in art, so they can all relax. And then also reminding them that there are many right answers when talking about works of art. Some people are sort of reluctant to discuss their observations, so we like to encourage them to remember that all their observations are valid. They do 4 different activities in the galleries, starting with an introduction using visual thinking strategies. Then we head and do a metaphors activity in contemporary art, moving on to a drawing activity where they all work together to draw one sculpture, and then end with a relaxation. These 4 activities are designed around keeping them in both a large group and then also giving them opportunities to work in small groups together. As I mentioned, we go across multiple collection areas. This is an image from our European collection where we often do our visual thinking strategies exercise. And we really try and rotate between discussion and also hands-on art making and kind of vary it up. So they're doing a variety of different things across their time. Each activity that we do ends with an opportunity to discuss how this relates to their clinical practice, either in a group discussion or often we have them write on note cards a reflection activity. So we thought we'd give you a taste of one of these activities. So what I'd like you to do is just take a moment to experience this exercise. So if you feel comfortable, I'd ask everyone to close their eyes and to imagine that you've walked into a darkened, quiet gallery space. You are surrounded by some beautiful life-size Buddhist sculptures made out of wood and metal and stone. And take 3 deep cleansing breaths in and out as you center yourself in this space. Is everyone feeling all relaxed now? You can open your eyes. So what we do with the residents and the interns is a little bit longer than that. We do a sort of guided relaxation throughout their bodies, but we do intentionally keep it short. It's probably about 5 to 8 minutes long. And the reason for that is the hope that they will then take this activity back to their hospital setting. They'll find a peaceful room, either inside or outside, where they might be able to practice this once at least throughout their day. And really an emphasis on self-care and the importance of that in the medical world.
So these are some of our results. This is the results from our 4th-year medical students. And basically all the students are surveyed on these different metrics. And as you can see, the vast majority felt that it was relevant to their education and that they would recommend it to another student. This is more information about the residents, so a larger group. And the important things here to see, I think, are that they found that the program was relaxing, that they had, that it was something outside of what they would normally do, but that it was an enjoyable activity for them. In terms of wellness, actually 32% in free text response identified it as improving their sense of wellness. So we thought that was pretty good results. Interestingly, this was an audience that was from HMS for the most part, so 42% had already participated in some kind of similar activity, thanks probably to Dr. Katz. These are some of the quotes that came from the groups, and they found that they were able to appreciate different perspectives, that they had enhanced relationships with their peers, it was relaxing, and it did give them an opportunity for reflection. And we can talk about future directions because we're out of time.
Sure. Do you want to talk about the workshop?
Yeah, so ideally we're going to be promoting this for our faculty and also out to other residency programs at the Beth Israel.
We're also using those responses that we've taken from the evaluation, both qualitative and quantitative, and writing an article as we speak, which hopefully will be submitted this week. And then hoping to add maybe some additional exercises to the curriculum next year, with perhaps a focus on working with patients who are dying and their families, and how best to kind of cope with that as a doctor. So, great. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Very relaxed after that first session.
How do we make this thing advance? Oh, this. Oh, great. Okay. So the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, PAFA for today, 7 minutes, has actually been working at the intersection of art and medicine since 1805. It's part of our founding curriculum for training the fine artists in our matriculated programs. And so along with this one and 2 other models that we work with in Philadelphia with Jefferson Medical College and the Drexel College of Medicine, it's part of a natural extension of sort of a 200-year history of trying to train artists and doctors next to each other.
And CMSRU was founded in 2012, and that's when we started our humanities program. We broke off of the somewhat fractured UMD&J system. So we just graduated our first class, actually. We wanted to have as the precepts of the medical school innovations in medical education, and also a basis in the humanities to inform the art and the science of medicine. So we started collaborating in fall of 2014. And our program is very broad, so there's opera, music, film, photography. It's a wide range of courses that are offered to the M1 and M2 students. It's mandatory that they must take 1 per year, but they can select within those offerings.
So you'll see a lot of goals listed, maybe an absurd amount, but that's only possible because we have a multi-layered program that intervenes in the curriculum at multiple points throughout the academic year. But in particular for students, we try to focus on ways that we can help them look at art and make art to develop a new visual vocabulary that will translate into a clinical vocabulary. And we also try to really emphasize the concepts of emotional intelligence, not just as a bedside manner issue, but partly the science behind it that translates directly into professional success on a larger scale.
And of course, all these program goals do overlap with the larger humanities curriculum. Some of them, you can see like the kinetic learning that we do with the drawing course definitely overlaps with our dance and medicine course, or for example, our theater and the role of role playing. So there's a lot of overlap, particularly with burnout. Hopefully all of these will address burnout. So we have a broad audience, as I said. So we're going to be focusing mainly on the M1 and M2 students, but we also target residents and attendings and faculty.
So very quickly, we use all 4 of these methodologies in our program, and we'll run through them each real quick for you. So in our 4-week humanities selective for students, the first week is spent actually orienting students to the long history of collaboration between artists and medical professionals. The goal here is to focus on discoveries like motion study photography, like plastic surgery, like the psychology of PTSD, so that they sort of understand other ways in which discovery has required collaboration over the years.
And then at the end, we introduce some of the works in the classical canon, things like the Mona Lisa showing physical diagnosis signs, doing Piero di Cosimo's Satyr mourning over a nymph. And we generate a differential diagnosis, and we do this both to get buy-in from residents, people who may be a little slow to accept, but also to see how it's directly applicable to their practice. They can look at the Mona Lisa and say, oh wow, I really never did see this in the picture.
Week 2 is the close-looking exercise in the galleries, and we owe the staff at Yale a huge debt for introducing us to that concept a while ago. And since this is something that I think is going to be covered in a lot of ways over the next 2 days, we're going to leave it at that. But the one thing I do want to point out is that the most important part of that, in my experience, is consistently and highly trained facilitators, particularly during the debrief at the end when we're trying to get students to understand what they just learned. The third week is the drawing exercise for students.
We are in a unique position as a university to have access to a large variety of nude models with very different physical presentations. So we always make sure to put up multiple nude models for the students so that they can actually start to see the difference between bodies as a form of composition. So lines, shapes, colors during their drawing exercise.
And then for students who really enjoy this, we also collaborate with Rowan's main art department, and they can go down to that campus, do live nude models, still lifes, but we also take them into the anatomy lab so they can do cadaveric sketching.
And thank you to Thomas Akins for providing us with this photograph from the 19th century that represents the ways in which the human body is read differently by the students. The last week is a focus on art as therapy. We are not licensed art therapists, but we do have a member of staff who's been both patient and has an expertise in special populations. And so we not only have the students do the art therapy exercises, things like the PPAT, person picking an apple from a tree, which is very quick, but we also give them model patients and model therapeutic interventions and have them actually develop hypothetical personal care plans for those patients using art therapy.
For our resident curriculum, so we recognize there's a hidden curriculum, and we could do a wonderful job training our M1 and M2s, but then if they enter the clinical setting and encounter burnout physicians, it could just be for naught. So, so we've done evening sessions in the gallery, and we've also done, if you go to the next slide, drawing sessions. It's with residency schedules, it's always very busy and sometimes hard to fit things into the schedule. We co-opted a noon lecture, and one of Monica's colleagues brought a bag of skulls, charcoal and paper, and we had 30 residents. We sat them down at 3 different papers, and she flitted around to different tables and and directed people when they weren't rendering, when they weren't actually rendering what their eyes were seeing. And it was a very well-received session, and the biggest report afterwards was that there was decreased stress after the session, so it's very, very valuable.
So we're in the middle of gathering qualitative and quantitative information, but in short, we do pre- and post-test writing exercises. We do give them 2 pre- and post-tests that are scaled. We give them both Budner's and the Santa Barbara Solids test.
The Jefferson Empathy Scale is administered to everyone. We're in the process of doing the MCEAT, the Mayer's Caruso-Salave Emotional Intelligence Test. The Jeffries Cultural Competency Scale we think is also relevant for our population, even though the collection is American art. It's from different time periods, so it is still a different culture. And of course, the overlap with the ACGME milestones. Dr. Katz already spoke about it, so I won't belabor that.
And since we're out of time, like everybody else, the future plans can maybe be a point of discussion that we do as a group.
This actually doubled over the past 24 hours, so.
Yeah, so we'll just skip it, but lots of ideas, of course. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. It's particularly meaningful to be presenting in this context because of the wonderful work associated with Harvard's elective course Training the Eye. And that's been a great inspiration to our program at the University of South Florida. In fact, I want to give a shout out to Alexa Miller, who was a consultant for us for our first couple of years doing this program. And I want to say, whatever good we achieved, Alexa deserves some credit for, and whatever we haven't achieved yet, it's not her fault, of course, right? So in 2012, we set out to create, yes, I'm on the right slide, a series of arts-based observation workshops for health students after learning about training the eye, and its basis in visual thinking strategies, a method that many of us use and value for its flexibility and utility in a variety of contexts. Our jumping off point was an ambition to extend VTS, a VTS-like approach, into other artistic disciplines in a way that would serve students across healthcare disciplines.
So at USF, we're particularly proud and want to highlight 2 key aspects of our program. The first is the program takes advantage of the university's commitment to interprofessional education. So the program is a partnership between the museum and USF Health at large. The program participants include medical students, nursing students, physical therapy, pharmacy, social work, and communication science and disorder students as well. So by design, this really allows students to learn from, with, and about each other. They also provide each other with insight on how they utilize information in different clinical contexts. Second, we've really adapted the traditional VTS model to create 4 interactive workshops in which students have the opportunity to explore, participate, create, and experience both the visual and performing arts, including music and dance.
So this interdisciplinary impulse, which at USF is coming from both health and the arts, has meant that from the start our program was not going to be able to place as much emphasis on the idea of clinical skill building. While we do make connections to clinical exam skills during the workshops, we've taken a broader approach to observation that is encompassed for us by the word attending. And attending, a word that we've already heard here today, is a process of directing one's attention that extends beyond visual observation into other sensory modes, and can also be a social and interpersonal process of being present in communication contexts. When we asked faculty and students, what does attending mean to you, they cited many of the terms you're seeing on screen. This more flexible conceptual framework has allowed us to create, first, a deeply interdisciplinary and interprofessional experience, and second, an open space for exploring together what there is to learn at the intersection of the arts and health. Thank you. And this,
We'll get it.
this comment by our dance faculty member, Mary Lynn Morris, really encapsulates our approach to attending. She says, I find that attending, if done well, usually involves the following elements: slowing down and indulging in time in order to notice more fully the details, nuances, and layers of an experience. Recognizing that knowledge is not fixed. Sustaining one's focus in an activity or experience. Adopting an explorative, open, and inquisitive attitude. Seeking connections and self-reflecting.
So as I mentioned, our series consists of 4 workshops that last 3 hours each. It's a voluntary experience as an elective, and it's attended by about 20 students per semester. Though each workshop is designed and couched in a different artistic discipline, they share common structure. So throughout each workshop, the students have the opportunity to observe, participate, communicate, and reflect upon their experience. So the first workshop is the studio art workshop, in which students are initially introduced into some basic vocabulary of shape and form. The experiences include a couple. One is blind contouring, which challenges students to draw without having the bias of actually seeing what they're drawing, without worry about judgment from their peers sitting next to each other. We also have color exercises in which students work together to create optical illusions or color images, and that really allows them to discuss how they perceive and interpret different experiences. At the close of this workshop, based on the teaching eye, we have a MD faculty member come in and discuss dermatologic cases by pictures without attention to the ultimate diagnosis, but rather describing what the students are actually seeing.
Our museum workshop is VTS based. Excuse me. Students undertake a series of discussions of contemporary artworks, starting with narrative photographs, and in fact, Gregory Crudson is one of the photographers who I always use. We start with him every time, and concluding with selections from our temporary exhibitions. After an initial VTS discussion, students actually take on the role of discussion facilitator in pairs, which challenges them to practice listening and paraphrasing their colleagues' observations. And this is an unusual way of using VTS that we adapted after seeing it used very successfully by Hope Torrance at the University of Miami's Lowe Art Museum. During this workshop, students also create a self-portrait using an iPod or cell phone camera, which is then briefly VTS'd in the group. And at the end of the workshop, a public health faculty member leads a VTS discussion of a selection of images chosen to address cultural difference. In order to achieve the same effect of quickly introducing students to a basic terminology of movement, dance professor Mary Lynn Morris has built her workshop around Laban movement analysis. This set of terms breaks down movement into elements of body, shape, space, and effort. After these elements are introduced, they can be used to describe or to guide students in movement. Students compare and contrast impressions that various types of movement convey. For example, after exchanging handshakes with various degrees of effort. They practice moving through space using styles of movement and reflect on their changes in perception and how they relate to others as a result. They partner up, They partner up and improvise poses describing what they see in the other's body positioning and vice versa.
And finally is our listening workshop, where our music professor, Paul Reller, walks students through a blind exercise where we already experienced earlier today, where students work in pairs, one's blindfolded and one is not, and they guide each other through the room. Then during the debrief, they're able to reflect on the experience of having vision separated from their hearing. And finally, we're also out of time, so we'll engage in the future directions. But we are focused on assessments. We're adding some other scales and tools, and really working to remove the compartmentalization of the arts from the science of medicine and really infuse it within the actual curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to the panel. Wonderful. We want to make sure that you have an opportunity to perhaps chat with them afterwards about their programs. We're running a little bit behind, and we want to make sure that you do get your hour. Sometimes it's a little longer to get your lunch in New York, but thank you so much. And I think Carrie has a couple of announcements.
So the restaurant list is in your packet. Also at MoMA, the cafe on the second floor, and there's a cafe called Terrace 5 on the fifth floor, are open. You have a MoMA ticket in your folder if you want to go there. We want to start promptly at 2, so please return to the theater and be sitting in your seat by then. And if you're on the 2 o'clock panel, if you could report down here about 10 minutes beforehand, that would be great. And if you haven't signed up for this afternoon's breakouts or tomorrow's teaching demonstrations, please do so. Thanks.